Hi, I'm Stephen Vantassel. You're listening to Living the Wildlife, discussing all things related to vertebrate pest control as part of the Pest Geek podcast family. This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant and Pest Geek podcast for the Living the Wildlife podcast. Always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and or other control methods to manage pests. Wildlife Control Consultant, LLC, Pest Geek Podcast, Living the Wildlife Podcast, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their or his affiliates are not responsible for followers' use of the information provided here. Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing you another episode of Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek Podcast family. Glad to have you on board. I hope your week went well. I have been quite busy, but it looks like my schedule is starting to come to a resolution, or should I say a little bit slower pace. I was involved in a vertebrate pest training event on Thursday where we had 32 students, and went pretty well. So workshops are always a lot harder than doing presentations, to be sure, when you're getting people out doing some hands-on stuff. So, but they seemed to enjoy it, and it was certainly gratifying to see how they were pleased with the training event. So that's always the good thing, as I say in my presentation. It's always great to be entertained, if not informed. So hopefully they were informed as well, and I think they were. Just a little bit of information. Just figured I'd give you a little shout out about my latest book, the Vertebrate Pest Handbook, 3rd edition. Those of you familiar with Dr. Austin Frischman, he wrote a book called the Vertebrate Pest Handbook. I was able to purchase the rights to that particular book, and he had the 2nd edition, and I updated it to now the 3rd edition, and I narrowed the scope of the content to just focus on commensal rodents. As you can see in the cover there, it says Norway rats, roof rats, house mice, and deer mice. Yeah, Peromyscus, I think, is something that, as a species group, that is under recognized, and so that's one of the presentations that I have. If you're looking for training events, is I do a presentation talk on Peromyscus, because so much energy is put into house mice, and house mice are certainly a significant problem in many parts of the country, but there's also a lot of people that live outside of the cities where the issue is not house mice, it's Peromyscus, Peromyscus pediculatus, deer mice, and also the white-footed mouse. And even when I was living in the urban city of Lincoln, Nebraska, with about 270,000 people, I was almost in the middle of the city, and I had deer mice in my house. So don't think that just because you're in a big city that it's automatically house mice. It's simply not true. But anyways, it's a question and answer type book. And so if you're looking for training material that you want to give to your workers, or perhaps even test yourself, the questions are in one area and the answers are in another. So it's really hard to just simply cheat. Sometimes you may think, I know what the answer is, and then you go, oh yeah, that's what I would have thought. And so this actually forces you to come up with an answer. You have to turn the page to kind of get to the answer key. So a lot of different ways, true, false, I believe, a lot of multiple, short answer, some matching, and some fill-in, that sort of thing. So with a bibliography, and it covers a lot of material. So it's about the same size as the previous book, but it's under a narrower content, rather, where he got into things like woodchucks and other animals like that. No, this is strictly on animals that attack structures and inside structures. So definitely check it out. Well, if you're not familiar with the Living the Wildlife podcast, this is a podcast dedicated to technical information involving vertebrate pest control. So that's animals with a spine. And so we delve into some areas, some arcane issues that the average podcast is not going to cover. So this is not just simply, how do I do X? There are plenty of people out there that do a fine job in that area that are certainly can be enriching of myself, but I delve into more of the arcane research-based information about doing vertebrate pest control. So we're happy to have everyone on here, but we tend to do some deep dives here, and also we tend to get a little geeky. And sometimes the analogy I sometimes use, you know how you were in school and you would say, I never am going to use this particular math issue or whatever, and then you find you get older and oh, lo and behold, maybe the teachers were right after all, that it was more important than what you thought. Not everything, to be sure, but a lot of times we tend to think, if I don't need the information right now, it's not important. Well, I deal with those things that people think aren't important that ultimately are when you look back from a bigger picture. It's not going to be central, may not be the most important thing, but it's not something that's going to be neglectful. So this is where I take the time and do some deep dives here. Would love to hear from you, hear your thoughts. You can definitely reach out to me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, and love to hear your comments, thoughts, suggestions for new shows, and yes, even criticisms. If you would like to be on the show, definitely reach out. We love having guests on the show because we think there's a lot of information out there that's not getting out to a wider audience, and we certainly want to facilitate that. If you have a new product, a new service, definitely reach out. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to have you on the show. People think it must cost, I would guess, but no, there's no charge. We do try to get in some deep dives here because we think that we're an underserved community, and we want to definitely participate in helping serve that important community, because vertebrate pest control is important. So pest control often gets all the attention. That's the bug killers. No offense to you folks out there. It's just some sort of internecine rivalry here, right? Army, Navy, that sort of thing. But nevertheless, we think we're important as well, the vertebrate pest control folks, those that do wildlife damage management. So you can definitely reach out to me again. Let me give you that email one more time, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. All right, enough of all that advertising. What are we going to talk about this week? Well, this week I want to talk about hearing loss. And so let me get my PowerPoint up and running here. So dealing with safety, yes, I know no one likes to talk about safety. It's like blah, blah, blah. It's too boring. It doesn't make you money, right? And so everything's about the big dollar bill. I get it. I understand this isn't popular, but remember, this is the Pest Geek podcast family. My show is on that sort of network of the Pest Geek podcast, so we do get geeky. And yes, your safety and the safety of your employees, if you have any, and the safety of even your clients is important and is part of your business. So it may not make you money, but it can certainly save you money, right? So what did Benjamin Franklin, a penny saved is a penny earned, right? So it may not be new cash in your wallet. Nevertheless, it's something that you can regret. And hearing loss is certainly a big issue, and that's what I want to talk about this week. So here we have a jackhammer making a lot of noise, and it's damaging our ears. Why is this so important? I am someone who suffers from hearing loss, and so when I was a child, I had a lot of ear infections, and that caused some damage to my hearing. And of course, I was also not as careful when I was mowing lawns, wearing earmuffs. We just didn't know. And so I suspect part of my hearing loss is due to some of the work that I was involved in. Vacuum cleaners. I used to work for a cleaning company part-time. And so you just you just lose your hearing over time. And then you also lose hearing just by getting older. As you get older, you have little hairs inside of your ears that vibrate when the sound waves sort of hit it, and as those become stiffened or damaged, it becomes harder and harder. It takes more energy for us to hear. And so this is a problem for those of us in the wildlife control field. We may not be doing jackhammering, to be sure, but there's a lot of activities that you're involved in that are going to be causing some hearing loss for you that, if you're not careful, is going to be a problem. So let's sort of discuss that a little bit here today. Let's give a few statistics. So 15% of American adults, and so about 37.5 million people, 18 years or older, report having hearing trouble. And I'm one of those statistics, right? Let me raise my hand. I'm one of that 15%. Age is the strongest predictor of hearing loss among those between 20 and 69 years of age. Men 29, 69 years of age old are twice as likely as women to have hearing loss, likely due to the type of work that men are often involved in. You think of construction workers, people that are firefighters, miners, men in heavy industry. Those are loud, big, banging, noisy occupations. And so those are issues where people can develop hearing loss. When you're hearing loud noises over an extended period of time, it damages your hearing. Those that are 18% of the people who are 20 to 69-year-olds report having greater than 5 years of exposure to loud noise at work have speech frequency hearing loss in both ears. So think about that. 18% of the public 20 to 69 years of age who have had 5 or more years of exposure to loud noises at work, very loud noises, have a speech frequency hearing loss. In other words, it's like, huh? What did you say? Yeah, that's what happens. And so that can be an issue. Now, for me, some of my hearing loss isn't all tied to loud noises. Some of that's from the infections, and I have tubes in my ears now, and so tubes being put in also diminish some of that hearing that you're able to do because you don't have as much of a surface area that's going to vibrate to hear that sound. But I am getting harder and harder of hearing, especially I'm getting old too, so this is a problem. 1 in 8 people in the United States, that's 13%, or about 30 million people, ages 12 or older have hearing loss in both ears based on standard hearing examination. So this is a significant health issue, but we don't really treat it like a big health issue because we just think it's, because we don't feel the pain. We don't have the motivation to make changes because hearing loss is, it's subtle, it's gradual, and it kind of creeps up on you, right? Until it's too late and you can't get it back. So what are some standards in the OSHA protocol? Well, according to OSHA guidelines, I know this is the agency that everyone loves to hate, right? But they do have an important role trying to protect worker health, and that means you. So even if you, as a small business owner, aren't going to necessarily follow the rules for yourself, you are required to follow them for your employees if you have them. But I want you to think about that a little bit deeper, and that is your health is valuable. You don't want to spend so much energy trying to make a living in your business, trying to build something for yourself. And then when you retire, you're basically a cripple in the sense either because you beat up your body too much or you're so deaf you have to wear hearing aids and you can't hear people talk or your grandchildren and this sort of thing. So you got to be thinking about the long ball here, right? Long term. Some of you guys are in your 20s and you're feeling your strength and your energy and you're like, what's the big deal, Stephen? I just want to warn you that you're going to get old. God willing, you're going to get old. And you want to be sure that you have a body worth keeping at the end of it all. So what does OSHA standard mean? So OSHA standard says that you're not supposed to listen to you're not supposed to be exposed to noises above 90 decibels for 8 hours a day. When the decibel level increases, the time of your exposure that's permitted decreases, right? Because you're dealing with a higher intensity noise. The higher the intensity, the more damage that noise can do to your hearing. So see how quickly things drop off. So at 90 decibels, you can listen to that 8 hours a day, according to OSHA. Once it goes to 92 decibels of exposure, you can only listen to that for 6 hours a day. At 95, it drops to 4. And then at 97, it drops to 3 hours. At 100, it drops to 2 hours. At 102, it goes to an hour and a half. At 105, it goes to 1 hour. At 110, it drops to half an hour. At 115 decibels, the noise, you can only allowed to listen to that for 15 minutes or less. So you're like, well, Stephen, how loud is that? Well, let's take a look at what those noises are. But before we get there, let me just emphasize, according to OSHA, you cannot be exposed to impulsive or impact noise above 140 decibels, peak sound pressure. So noises that exceed 140, there is no good amount of time for that. That's always think of it as always doing damage. So what are the relative sound levels, right? So remember, the standard for OSHA is 90 decibels. So what is above that? Well, a portable music player can be up to 100 decibels, depending on what sound level you're putting that at. A wood shop is 100 decibels. A concrete saw electric grinder is 98 decibels. A bulldozer is 100 decibels. A chainsaw and an accelerating motorcycle at 1 meter is 110 decibels. A jackhammer is 102. A grater or a scraper is 107. Chainsaw, of course, is 110. Jet engine at takeoff is 140. Gunshot is 140. Now, what is lower than 90 decibels? Well, a proper lawnmower is 90 decibels, just at that threshold, right? But then you can see, if you're those of you able to see this particular chart, it says OSHA recommends that employees not be exposed to noise levels greater than 85 decibels. So the standard's 90, the recommendation is 85. So if you're using a lawnmower, you should be wearing hearing protection, right? Which is something I didn't do when I was a kid, right? I do it now, but I didn't do it when I was a kid. Normal conversation is 60 decibels. A whispered voice is 30 decibels. And the threshold of unimpaired hearing, of course, is 0 decibels, right? So a framing saw, not exactly sure what that is. So 82 decibels for that. So it kind of gives you some relative numbers on what those noises are, right? And so a forklift, 93, nail gun, 97, backhoe, 85. So a lot of equipment, some of these pieces of equipment you're probably not using as a wildlife control operator, but you need to be thinking about, are you going to be working in areas where other people are using those tools? And are you going to be exposed, depending on the environment, to those types of noise levels? This is where you want to be thinking about it. Because even a power drill, it may be below the permissible limit, but is it something, if you're going to be doing a lot of power drilling, should you take the time to put in some earplugs? I'm going to suggest that you definitely consider it. Now, what do you do in situations where you're dealing with what's called combined noise? And that is, well, you used a power saw at this particular moment, and maybe you used a nail gun, or maybe an automatic, a skill saw somewhere else, and maybe you're doing a lot of hammering, breaking rocks or something. Maybe you were using a ditch digger to do some trench screening. How do you calculate some of this? Like, especially for those of you with employees, you're obligated to make sure that they're not exposed above those particular limits. So how would you do that? Well, there's a particular formula by OSHA for you to calculate whether those noise levels exceed the standard. So here's the formula. It's FE equals time 1 divided by level 1 plus time 2 divided by level 2. So let's explain what that means. So FE is the noise exposure factor. That number should be less than 1. T is the period of noise exposure at any essentially constant level. That would be time 1 exposure. So if you were doing a power drill for 30 minutes, that would be put in as 0.5. The L is the duration of the permissible noise exposure at the constant level. That is what the decibels of the duration of the permissible noise exposure at the constant level. So that's divided by what the level of noise that you should be listening to, right? So kind of we're looking for that difference there. So what's the duration of permissible noise exposure at that constant level? And then you kind of calculate that out to get your number. And so what are those numbers? Well, this is where we get this chart. I've got to get to it. There we go. So I've got to get to a different chart, and I neglected, I think, to put that down. My apologies. No, I think I'm still good. So if you're dealing with these different noises, you have to then calculate out what that noise exposure factor ultimately is going to be. I'll probably have another podcast on this particular formula as I've done some work in Excel. So we're probably going to get back to that because I'm a little muddled here and I should be more clear for you, for myself, and for you to get this out. But nevertheless, don't miss the point. Protect your hearing. So what are the ways that you can do that? Well, there's actually a lot, right? So let's look at some of these hearing devices, these protective hearing devices that you can use. You can get the roll-down foam. You can get the reusable earplugs. You can get custom molded earplugs. Now, if you're getting custom, that has to be made by a licensed hearing protection provider, right? So you got to get that from either a hearing specialist or perhaps your ear doctor. Then they have what's called canal caps. Those are kind of neat because you can then just drop them around your neck. Of course, there are also some other types of earplugs that also have a cord on them so you can hang those around your neck. I've been trying to get into the habit of carrying some ear protection with me all the time. I don't know if I could pull that out for you here. Let's see if I've got it with me at the moment. I don't know if I put it on I think I might have put it down somewhere else at the moment. But I certainly am getting into the habit of carrying earplugs more frequently than I have in the past, which I never did. Part of that is due to the fact that I work in the fire department now, and so if you want to hear noise, listen to an engine vehicle go. Those diesel engines are incredibly loud. And then, of course, your traditional ear muffs. Now, one of the things with your ear muffs, the ones that go over your head, is that you want to make sure, like I've got glasses, right? So that is going to make it a little bit harder to get some of that ear protection. I like the ear muffs. They seem to work pretty well. And don't forget that in some situations, you may need to use ear plugs and the ear muffs at the same time. Now, what you want to be careful of is wearing earbuds, right? Let me pull those out for you here. Some people will use earbuds, and they'll put their earbuds inside of their inside, and then put the hearing element, your earmuffs over the top of that, and then you're cranking this up because there's so much external noise still getting in, and so now you're doing damage to your ear directly, right? Because you're cranking it up to try to hear underneath that. So you want to be careful when you're doing that, and don't think for 1 minute that these are actually going to be protecting you from noise. Now, it may be better than nothing, but they're not designed to stop excessive noise from reaching you. So don't think of them as earplugs, right? So it's important to consider that. Think about your hearing protection. So one of the things that OSHA wants us to consider, and that is try to plan your activities so that you're thinking about, I'm going to a new job site. What am I going to be doing at that job site? Am I going to have is there going to be the potential for loud noises? That's kind of the plan. Then you need to prepare on the basis of what you think is going to happen. What type of equipment do you need to have, that PPE, that personal protective equipment that you need to have to protect your hearing? And that's something we often forget. We may think about the eyes, we may think about a respirator, which we certainly should, right? Those are two biggies, absolutely. But don't forget your hearing is also very important. So are you preparing to protect your hearing at the job site for different situations? Sometimes it's not what you're doing, it's the environment you're going to be working in should you be wearing hearing protection. And then lastly, you actually have to implement it. Just simply having the equipment doesn't help if it's still in the truck or still in your pocket. You've got to actually implement it. One of the catchphrases from OSHA is the only hearing protection that matters is the one that you actually use. And that is certainly the case. So prepare. Hearing protection is not that expensive. There are lots of ways you can get it done. Learn how to use these particular devices and get enough of them so you can have them around, have them handy in your vehicle. They're not going to take up a whole bunch of space, but they can do an inordinate amount of work protecting your hearing over the long haul. So definitely think about that. I hope you found that helpful. I know it's certainly not a positive presentation in the sense, hey, it's going to make me money, it's going to change my life. Well, it could prevent you from changing your life in a bad direction where you're going, what did you say? I can't hear you, speak up. That is a really uncomfortable, and it can often lead to isolation where you're not able to hear people's conversations, and it gets annoying keeping to ask people what they said, can they repeat it? It can be very frustrating in that regard. I'm getting to that place now. It is discouraging. A lot of people today don't enunciate well. Part of that is because people don't talk. They're using a lot more texting and they don't have the communication skills in the past. So it's getting even worse. So I've had to get into the habit of wearing some hearing aids from time to time. Not just wearing earplugs to protect my hearing, what hearing I have left, but actually wearing hearing aids when I'm in certain situations to help ensure I'm able to hear people speak, because people often, they won't use a louder voice for some reason, right? And so because my hearing, and I've had it tested, is I'm really at that marginal level where things really start to drop off. So I'm on the path for some severe hearing loss over time. Don't be me, right? Protect yourself. Learn how to protect yourself. Actually do it. Wear those hearing aids and prepare. Don't allow yourself to be exposed longer, and certainly don't make your employees have that type of exposure, because that could really open you up to some problems down the line. Well, I'm Stephen Vantassel. You've been listening to Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek podcast family. I do hope you subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. Would love to have you. You can also reach out to me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you, your thoughts about the show, suggestions for new shows. Perhaps you have questions that you'd like to have answered. If you just send a question in, I do consultation, of course, but if you're just saying, hey, this is a show I'd like to have, it's a way for me to do some of that work for you for free, as opposed to having to pay for it. I do have a lot of course, previous podcasts. Definitely check some of those out. I've covered a lot of different subjects. And then, of course, if you don't want to use YouTube, you can also find me over at Rumble. Just look up Wildlife Control Consultant, and you can find me there. Do visit the website. We have some supplies there and some equipment and information issues that can be helpful for you. I can help you with developing your PowerPoint. Perhaps you're going to be involved in some training. Getting a good PowerPoint is important. Perhaps you want to have some ghostwriting done. Definitely can do that. Or maybe you're looking for an expert witness to help you with a particular case. Definitely reach out to me. Or if you need some training, we do that as well. So hope you enjoyed the show. Hope to see you next time. Again, this has been Living the Wildlife. Why do we call it Living the Wildlife? Well, because we want you to live the wildlife, not be the wildlife. Take care, everyone.